Every January 22nd, as part of the annual March for Life, thousands of people come together in Washington, D.C. to remember the landmark Supreme Court decision from 1973, which declared abortion as constitutional. This January 22nd, 1973 Supreme Court decision, of course, was Roe v. Wade, in which the court interpreted the Constitution to require all states to allow abortion on demand at least up until the age of fetal viability, but more on that later. The court's decision immediately gave America the world's most radical abortion law. Unwritten, in quotes, constitutional right to choose an abortion granted by the Supreme Court is almost absolute. A state cannot prevent or obstruct a person's access to abortion indirectly or directly. Think of it this way. In Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court declared that private violence is constitutional. After all, killing someone is the most violent act that someone can do to somebody. And unfortunately, in our society, the people who are suffering from this, the primary people who are suffering from this, are our voiceless, most vulnerable people. That would be our unborn children. But there is a 19th century parallel to Roe v. Wade, which often, far too often, goes unnoticed. The heinous and hypocritical similarities are undeniable. This infamous case is known as Dred Scott versus Sanford, and what the Supreme Court said here was that if you are a slave, neither you nor your descendants could ever be recognized constitutionally as an American citizen in any American state. You see, the Roe v. Wade ruling essentially is akin to slavery, as it treats a whole class of people as chattel, while Dred Scott concluded that slavery was legal and that blacks do not have the right to constitutional protection. Roe v. Wade said that unborn children do not have the right to constitutional protection. Abraham Lincoln smartly pointed out in his Cooper's Union address that the argument for slavery then was that a man cannot be a man if he's black. Similarly, today, Roe v. Wade says that a woman cannot be a woman if she's unborn in a mother's womb. Let's put this hypocrisy in another way. One way that can fit today's modern sensibilities. So allow me to engage in a little historical hypothetical. What if then Chief Supreme Court Justice Roger Brooke Taney, the author of Dred Scott Sanford, the most infamous legal case in U.S. history, what if he was never involved? Assume that the country was shaped by Chief Justice Taney's decision, which stated that slaves could be transported anywhere in the Union and that blacks could not be citizens because they were regarded as being a lower order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race. According to the High Court, blacks were not people, they were property. Now just imagine what the country would be like today if these words were the pillar of American human rights, a new birth of liberty, instead of a source of contempt, derision, and moral dread. In such a circumstance, some Americans may have stayed opposed to slavery and even demonstrated against it. But what if they were vastly outnumbered? Not by zealous proponents of human slavery, but by the bulk of citizens who, while they may have never owned slaves themselves, did not believe they should interfere with another person's right to do so. Sound familiar? I mean, can't you see that today? Can't you see people saying, well, slavery may be bad, but you know what? That's a self-conscious issue. That should be something that they deal with. The government shouldn't be involved in that. No, we'll stay out of that. This brings me to this episode's Liberty's hero. That's none other than Dr. Alveda King. She is the daughter of slain civil rights leader J.D. King and the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King has been at the forefront of the pro-life movement and been championing the rights of unborn children for over 40 years. Currently right now, there is a case at the Supreme Court called Dobbs versus Jackson, which talks about the viability of unborn children. I had the honor of speaking with Dr. King, and here is what she had to say on this.
Let me mention the case coming down through the United States Supreme Court. The people need to decide. They need to be able to vote for people who will help us to live and not kill us. and that's called the Dobbs case. And to decide if a 15-week-old baby can live, if it's viable, and of course it is, because science has proven that. So that needs to go back to the states to let the people vote accordingly.
The Dred Scott ruling said that blacks should be treated as property and that they had no rights. The Roe v. Wade ruling, on the unconstitutional basis of viability, said the same thing. The unborn children are property and have no rights. In the meantime, I applaud Dr. Alveda King and the thousands like her that show up by the thousands in Washington, D.C. every January 22nd. I'm Kyle Suggs of The Conservative Take for Red Liberty Media.